tell you it was a profound event. I think when I was growing up as a kid, and I should tell you that my parents were Democrats, but they weren't political in politics. They voted Democrat. But politics was not an important part of their lives. My brother got active in groups. He went to Brooklyn College, and I learned something from him. But it's interesting when you talk about the University of Chicago, where I did go. When I went there, I was really quite overwhelmed. And it was a very difficult place for me to be there, because I was around a lot of kids whose parents were doctors and lawyers and business people and everybody else, and it really was difficult to fit in. And I would tell you that in my experience, I hesitate to say this here on the campus of Smith College, but most of what I learned was off campus. I became involved in the civil rights movement with some wonderful people in Chicago. I got arrested as part of the effort to desegregate these schools in the city of Chicago. We were then had some of you who are my age may remember CORE, Congress on Racial Equality, remember that?
Yeah.
And what we did in Chicago, we worked with our brothers and our sisters in SNCC in the South and trying to get them some money, but we also organized in the South. We took on segregated housing, segregated schools. And I will never forget walking down, it was 57th Street in Chicago, putting up little posters announcing a meeting against police brutality. And I'm putting it up, and I'm putting it up. Little did I know there was a police car right behind me taking them down. And the officer stopped me and he showed me the leaflet. He said, "You put them up?" I said, "Yeah." And then we went into the outside agitator and all of that stuff. But I learned during that period, we worked in the Student Peace Union, learned a little bit about foreign affairs, got involved in the Young People's Socialist League, learned a little bit about democratic socialism. So I would say, and spent half of my life reading in the basement of the Harper Library. They were an excellent library. So I didn't do terribly well in school, but my education was. In fact, the dean there suggested that I take some time off to think about what I wanted to do academically. But I was surely not a star student. But I learned mostly from wonderful people who had a lot of life experience, and that was really my introduction to politics.
And it's a good spot at which to mention the S word. You said you joined the Young People's Socialist League and YPSLs. And in the early 1960s, there were not that many people right on the cusp of Joe McCarthy deciding to go to meetings of socialists. What attracted you? What was your interest? Where did that come from?
Well, a couple of things. It never occurred to me that it was a good idea that a few people had so much and so many people had so little. It never occurred to me that it was a good idea that you had bosses who had enormous power, working people who had very little power. And by the way, the situation today is much worse than it was then. And then during that period, I also learned that there were social democratic governments throughout the world that were doing some pretty good things. And I hope during this evening, John, we'll be discussing not only some of the really advances that social democratic societies have made, but media as well, because I think to understand where we are as a country, to talk about the need for a political revolution, also requires us to talk about the function of media, corporate media in American society. But one of the travesties about media is that very few people in this country know some of the real advances that have taken place in countries around the world. They're not utopia. Many of you have been to Finland and Denmark and Sweden and Norway. Not utopia. They have their share of problems. But you know what? They have gone a long way to eliminating childhood poverty. That's pretty good. All people in their country have health care as a right. That's pretty good.
Yes.
They don't pay the tuition that parents of Smith College students pay to go to college. In many of these countries, college education is free. They have strong retirement programs. So they haven't created utopia. But they have done some enormously important things that we should look at. And the sad thing is, very few people in America know anything about that. Last summer, I invited the ambassador to from Denmark to come up to Vermont. And I'm the only, I'm sure, member of Congress. No, why did I do that? Turns out to be a really nice guy. And I said, just like this, we're standing up there. I said, Mr. Ambassador. And we did town meetings in Burlington and Montpelier and Brattleboro.
I'm afraid you're going to come arrest you.
There we go. And I said, Mr. Ambassador, what percentage of the people in your country come out to vote? Oh, last election, 89%.
Wow.
Mr. Ambassador, do they have TV ads, ugly 30-second TV ads? And he thinks, I don't think we do any TV at all in terms of elections. Mr. Ambassador, how much does it cost for people in your country to get health care? Hard question to understand. Of course it's free. You know? So we had hundreds and hundreds of people coming out to those meetings, and we have to learn. Are those countries perfect? No. Are small, pretty homogeneous countries the same as a big country like the United States? No. But what it does tell me is that if we get our act together, we can make huge changes in lowering poverty, improving education, providing health care to all people, and strengthening democratic institutions. So if you want to talk about democratic socialism, you know, there is already something that we can learn from some of the Scandinavian